I'm Sarah Davis. I'm the Jisc Programme Manager for the Developing Digital Literacies Programme. And the work that we'll be hearing about today is from some of the projects on that programme. As you can see from the slide there, the programme is looking at institutional strategies and organisational approaches for developing digital literacies. And we're looking at that for all sorts of groups of staff. We're not just talking teaching staff within the programme, and for students. And again, obviously there's such a wide variety among students in the area of digital literacies in UK further and higher education. So we've got 12 projects, plus a strand of professional associations who are also involved with the programme, looking at what the sort of findings and what the work in this area means for their members. And those projects started July 2011 and they're running till July of this year. So this is a good time for us to start talking about the things that the projects are doing and the ideas and issues and approaches that are coming out of those projects. So with an eye on the time, I think I'll move on now just to ask Helen, who's our synthesis consultant supporting the programme, to start leading the meat of this session, and I'll be back to chair some of the questions later on.
Thank you, Sarah. It's Helen Beetham, and can I just ask for a show of hands to put your hand up if you can hear me okay? Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'll assume that that you can. So it's been great to be involved with this programme right from the beginning, really. And I think for me, it seems quite normal to talk about digital literacies now, but we have to remember that a few years ago it really wasn't, and this marked quite a step change for the Jisc. And I think what Jisc we're acknowledging, and others of us acknowledge as we do digital literacy work, is that it's no longer a situation where institutions adopt certain technologies and people have to adapt to them. We're talking about a situation now where to thrive, to survive even, people at institutions are constantly adopting and adapting to new technologies in their environment. And institutions are definitely not fully in control of the technologies that their staff are using or that their students are using. So this is a programme that's very much about capability. It's about the capability of institutions and, of course, of students and learners and other staff and institutions to thrive in that environment. And it's really exciting for me to work on a programme that's so much about human development and about people's potential with technology. So I guess you will probably bring your own definitions of digital literacy, and in a minute I'm also going to ask what roles you play in relation to digital literacy, because one of the things we do know from our baseline and ongoing work is that those roles are changing quite considerably. Jisc has quite a broad definition, which has been helpful, I think, to bring the programme into realisation. And we tend to talk about the capabilities, aptitudes and attitudes that learners need to thrive as learners and as workers and as members of the digital economy and society. And it's really interesting that as the programme has gone forward, many of the institutions involved have adopted their own strategic definitions of what they think digital literacy means for them or for their learners. So I've put some of them on the slide. And it might be interesting if you have a phrase that you use in your institution that works for you. It might be digital professionalism. It might be around scholarship. You might talk about learning literacies in a digital age, or learning literacies. You might talk about employability and preparing learners for work. It would be interesting to share in the chat box if you have any phrases, or especially any kind of changes to institutional strategies that begin to reflect digital literacy as something we need to address. So in thinking about what we mean in practical terms by digital literacy and how it impacts across the institution, originally we came up with a number of areas of capability that we felt digital literacy encompassed, and SCONAL has also adopted in their survey work that they have done with their members, that's the University Librarians Association. They've adopted these as kind of helpful ways of thinking about the digital in relation to learning. And if you do a web search on digital literacy, you'll tend to find results that focus at this first issue and possibly the second. So issues around computer literacy, information literacy, so the capacity to actually functionally access technology, to be confident users of technology, the capabilities around finding and managing and interpreting information, particularly online information, come very much to the fore when you kind of do searches around this term. But I think what's emerged, particularly as we do work in subject areas, is that there's a whole range of ways that different disciplines and different professions and vocations bring their own capabilities to digital literacy. So of course we're also talking about media literacy, which is an awareness of how messages pass in digital means and how we react to them, and also how we can create messages of our own. We're talking about new modes of collaborating, whether that's with research colleagues, whether that's in learning groups, whether that's, as we enter the workplace, collaborating with colleagues around the world on common projects across all kinds of boundaries, whether they're institutional or national or cultural. So at university and in college, we need to be beginning to think about those capabilities and how the digital influences the needs that students have to be able to communicate. Obviously, because we are most of us rooted in academic contexts, then we also need to be aware of how publishing, research collaboration, and all the elements that go to make up academic life, are, including teaching and learning, but interestingly in this programme not confined to teaching and learning, are being changed by the availability of digital media, of open scholarship, of open data, of open science, and all those kind of big agendas. And how we share those with learners is an issue for the programme, but certainly we can't address learners as though those things aren't happening in our institutions and as though scholarship goes on as it has done for the last several hundred years. So digital scholarship has become part of our agenda, and in research-led institutions an important way of talking about this agenda so that it becomes more approachable and more central. And whether you call them academic literacies, learning skills, of course, because we're based in learning contexts in colleges and universities, we're interested in how people study with technology, how they come to learn effectively. And as informal and non-formal and formal learning tend to cross boundaries, we're also interested in supporting people as lifelong learners, not only when they come directly into contact with the learning that we offer to them on campus and in the classroom. So those kind of various ways of thinking about literacy have been useful, I think, but perhaps not sufficient. And one of the exciting things you'll hear about in a minute from some of the projects is that they're developing their own models and ways of thinking about digital literacy that work for their institution and for their students. So at Greenwich, there's an emerging model which you can find online called the 5 Resources Model, and they talk about decoding, meaning making, using and analysing, which may be more familiar at that information and media literacy level that I spoke about. But also they talk about personal identity, and that's coming through from many projects as an area that students and staff both feel anxious about and also feel that digital technology is creating a lot of change, many of it positive and exciting, some of it worrying, about how they present their identity personally, professionally, and as learners, how digital means support that and complicate that, and the fact that becoming more proficient isn't just a question of adding new skills onto old ones, but does actually change who we are in the world. So it's really great to see new approaches to thinking about this emerging from the projects, and those that really take the sort of full human being and the full people that we are when we're learning or teaching or researching into account. And if you don't hear more about that later, you can. I do recommend you go to the Digital Literacy and Transition project site and look for that model, which is an exciting one. Okay, so I promised that I would ask how you were involved in digital literacy work, and these may not be the only options, and this is where the chat box comes in very useful. Do please give more detail to your response in the chat box. But just for starting the conversation, really, it would be useful to have a look at those 5 options and choose the one that feels most relevant to your responsibilities. Then if you go to the poll option, which Marion showed you was a tick or a cross, it's now an A to E, and select one of those. And in a minute we'll do a results and see how this particular group of 60 or so people distributes, or nearly 70 people now, distributes around those. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and make my selection, and if you'd like to make yours. So as well as making your selection from the polling tool, which is at the top, if you could write in the chat box some detail about your role, that would be really helpful. But if you're writing the number in the chat box, you also need to enter the number in the poll, otherwise we won't be able to get a result from and compare can play numbers. Okay, I'm going to give everyone a chance to choose the topmost. Everyone's writing combinations, and I think the combined roles are really interesting. If you could choose the topmost one just for the purposes of comparison, that would be really useful. And we'll just look at the results and then maybe chat a bit about the complexity of how roles and boundaries are changing in this area. Okay, well, many of you resenting being forced to make a choice, which I do understand, because of course boundaries are changing. Many people who are working in this area might have been called something different last year. Their job description might not have changed at all, but you might suddenly have more responsibilities. You might be working in partnership with different people. So that's all sort of fuel for thought. I'm going to move the slides on and ask if Will could get rid of the poll results. So B and C seem to predominate, which I think is what I would have expected. But very interesting to see those of you who are responsible at other levels for supporting students directly, for supporting the learning environment and strategically. And of course, you're all very important parts of the picture. Now, I said it was exciting to me to be involved in a programme that's about developing people, and that's very much so. And the model that I've used for some years for thinking about how people develop through different experiences with technology is this one. And it shows how those of us responsible for the learning environment have a really important role to play, because of course without basic access and functional skills it's very difficult to build these higher order capabilities that we've been talking about, the situated practices of the discipline or the profession and the identity work that sits on top of it. And one of the things that we need to think about is how we offer both the intensive, well-defined and simplified activities that people need, learners and staff, to become more aware and to gain those functional skills. Sometimes it seems best to do that outside of the curriculum, although we've got interesting and contradictory research results about that. And those particularly further and higher educational experiences, which are extensive, complicated, not always well defined, often involve different aspects of the person and may cross subject boundaries, which are creating those situated and identity-based practices and capabilities. And there's lots of exciting work in the project around how some of those more situated activities can take place. And we're talking there about supporting those things across the curriculum, in the co-curriculum, and giving people the capacity in their non-formal learning also to take those skills and that awareness through that as well. So I'm going to move to the projects fairly quickly, but just to summarise how we're developing institutions, if you like. We have these two strands of the programme. It's about developing institutions, but developing institutions to develop people, to develop these capabilities in people. And I've already mentioned there are different kinds of learning experience that do that. And that's one of the things we audited at all the institutions involved in the programme at the beginning. But there are other things that were audited as well. So as well as looking at the learning experience and practices in the curriculum, we've looked at things like the roles and responsibilities of professional staff, academic cultures and learning cultures in the institution, and the attitudes of staff and students. Lots of very interesting surveys done around that. Of course, we've audited some of the relevant strategies, and I think it was an average of about 6 or 7 strategies at every institution were found to have some element that impacted on this agenda and the infrastructure and learning environment. And if you go to the URL I'll give at the end, you'll be able to see some of the results of those findings. So what's actually being done in projects? Well, a whole range of activities, and I think some of the things you will hear from the 4 projects, even though I've asked them to talk about different approaches, is that actually pushing forward on a whole range of approaches is really the key to making things happen institutionally. So there's a range of professional development work being done, whether that's tied to professional benchmarks and frameworks, or whether it's much more loosely structured around workshops or projects. A lot of work being done in partnership with professional staff such as employability, library staff, learning skills staff, partnership staff, widening participation staff, a whole range of staff that have an interest in how the digital can support learners in their experience. mini projects in departments, leading to a very rich picture of how different disciplines and subjects support digital literacy. And around that there'll be a whole range of materials available, and I'll say a bit more about that right at the end. One of the big excitements has been working with students who are often digital pioneers and allowing them to use some of their digital know-how to make change in their learning context can be very exciting both for them and for the institutions involved. A range of change management approaches, as you would expect, and of course a range of strategic approaches around how the IT environment is changing, whether bring your own device is an agenda that has implications for students' digital literacy, and if that's something that should be addressed right at the outset when students arrive with their expectations, with their induction and in the curriculum. So I'm going to give an opportunity for a few questions now to me, if there are any, or clarifications, and just a couple of minutes. If you want to type questions in the chat box, feel free, and if you want to put your hand up, that's fine. We'll have a couple of questions, but I do think the meat of this is going to be when you hear from the 4 projects who will be coming up just after this. So I'll just ask any questions from me now, and all of those projects will also be giving you a chance to ask questions of them. Okay, certainly questions. We'll move. Question about professional benchmarking. So Sharon, we're working, as Sarah said, with 10 of the associations involved mainly in higher education, and some of those, the AUA, the Association of University Administrators, the ALT, which many of you will know, the Association for Learning Technology, are looking at their professional standards, accreditation standards, and through a lens of digital literacy, and whether there are ways that that could be adapted for the new needs that their members have. We've also created a mapping of digital literacy resources and issues onto the UK PSF, which is quite an exciting development. So that means there's the potential to have an impact on the initial training of teachers in higher education. And there's a variety of role descriptions and job descriptions that have come out of the projects, which we're collating together to provide a kind of picture of how jobs are changing and roles are changing, even if those aren't yet officially recognised in professional standards and benchmarks. So it's a range of work going on, which will be brought together in the design studio. Tim's asking about guidelines for managers on staff development. I'm not entirely sure what you mean there. There certainly will be a lot of stories about change, and at least 2 of the projects who are talking now will be able to offer a lot of lessons about managing change and managing restructuring. Guidelines on staff development, there'll be resources for staff development, and there will be activities with guidance around using those with staff. I know a number of projects have worked directly with HR in their institutions, and we do expect that those institutional lessons will be something that we can talk about. Whether we can say that this is a guide that will work everywhere, I'm not sure, but certainly it's an interesting request. I'm going to pass over now. I'm not sure I'm passing to Neil or to Anne, but I will pass over to somebody from SeedPod to speak about the Plymouth University project.
Thanks for that, Helen. It's Neil, which hopefully you've worked out by now. I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to cant through some of our main findings. I'll push you to the Jisc project or program website for further links to our project. Helen mentioned the institutional audit. That was one of the starting places for our project. But the story I want to tell you about is just sort of the impact that the project has had on our institutional change. Initially, we set out to do a number of great and good things associated around digital literacies, but the outcomes of the project has been really based about changes and recommendations we can make on our sort of institutional infrastructure, our support and curriculum design, and taking as many opportunities as possible to really embed and get the digital literacy, digital skills message out across the institution. And this applies right across the university. This is students, our academic staff and our professional support staff as well. So this is sort of digital literacies for the whole institutional approach. And opportunities are really, really important to us. I mean, I'm sure most universities and colleges at the moment, we're running around. It's that time to put new strategies together. We were extremely fortunate to be involved in the putting together of our institutional digital strategy. And part of that was facilitated by the fact we were a Jisc project. There was recognition that we had a lot of evidence from our own project. We're working with the sector, so we were taken very, very seriously when we said that digital literacy is an imperative for the institution. And we fed into a couple of these main areas. I'm not going to go into any details, but it's about digital people, students and all staff, and it's about making sure that we can support staff and students through a range of skills and literacies. And the digital literacy work sort of cascades right the way through our digital strategy. So that was our first opportunity. New strategies being put into place, we were able to use the evidence to say that we need to take this work really, really seriously and embed it. The second area is to work with our HR department. Not something that most academic staff tend to do, is actually working with an HR department. We were fortunate. There was an opportunity that we've basically developed a new performance development review process. So we've moved on from the old appraisal process into something that is more holistic and embedded into practice. And it's an opportunity for us to work with staff and heads of school and heads of service to identify the digital skills development, the digital literacy development that's needed right across the board. And working with our HR department, we can actually pull all that together and make sure we can actually respond to institutional needs. The third one, which is probably the most scariest one, was about a year ago we were restructured. We have an ambition for 2015 to reshape our future because there's a number of pressures in the sector. The nature of HE is changing. And we saw this as a great opportunity to actually make some recommendations when it comes to the way that we support staff and students with these digital skills right across the institution. And really that's the bit I want to concentrate on. As part of this restructuring, we've completely reprofiled our old computing services, which was in ILS, Information and Learning Support, and we've taken a more industry standard model of how we actually deal with our technology and respond to requests and respond to development. As part of that, we've set up a new department, which I now head, which is called Academic Support, Technology and Innovation, a very long title there. And this is bringing together services which were traditionally in the teaching and learning areas and put them in with technology. And part of my role is to be the annoying academic on the shoulder of our new Chief Information Officer to make sure that the user voice is there, and it's reminding everybody that what we're doing this for, we're a university, it's about teaching, learning, assessment, research and other things. But really what we have to do is make sure that we can embed the user voice and the user experience right through all our technology offerings. So that's been a very, very interesting journey, and Helen has already mentioned that we've got revised job descriptions and new roles out which we'll make available as part of the project, and there'll be more detail in that part of our journey. What we've done with the new department is a real focus around digital literacy right across the board. And I've now got an expanded team of about 30 people to support me in doing this. I have reprofiled what was an IT training role into digital skills development, so that's being able to support staff and students through a variety of ways using a 24/7 model, so it's not just face-to-face training, there's lots of resources, there's lots of video support, and linking into our HR processes, we can actually respond to need quite quickly. We have a lot of work going on with engagement and support, a role that was done working with our subject librarians, but these guys are very much student-facing as well. So that's expanding their role with traditionally on information literacy, working with a whole range of digital literacies. And my learning technologists are also part of that as well. We have a hub and spoke model, so I've got guys actually embedded in the faculties working with academic staff. And actually being part of this new Technology Information Services department makes us, we can embed these activities a lot easier right across the board. And we're hoping that it'll be a single point of entry. So in all digital skills development for staff and students, we are the main point of entry into a whole load of university systems. And the final part of the project, which we were originally just going to make some recommendations on, is actually embedding this into the curriculum. One of the things that we've done is we've highlighted a number of places within our curriculum design process that we can embed digital literacies, and working with our Pro Vice Chancellor Teaching and Learning, our quality support unit, and other agencies around the university, our partnerships faculty, for instance, we've identified these key points where we can make sure that the digital literacy needs of staff and students are met. So for instance, in module review, program review, when we put in new programs together, when we're working on a new partnership agreement, the digital literacy, digital skills areas are flagged up at the relevant points, and we can support those processes with the relevant resources and other processes to make sure it's actually embedded and joined up. We're not going to report back on that by the end of the project, because that's probably about 18 months work and is quite a complex process. And I'm just going to finish off on a lesson that's come through from the curriculum design program, that when you start doing these big institutional approaches, it's very hard to measure, and it's actually quite difficult to evidence, but it does actually have impact. And by the end of the project, we'll have made hopefully some big steps towards embedding digital skills and digital literacy in a number of areas, and we'll be able to report back at the end of the project what our experiences are, what we've done, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and hopefully that means that everybody will be able to benefit from it. So that's a very, very brief overview of the CPOD project, and I'm aware that I've probably overrun by a couple of minutes. So if anybody does have any questions, please ask them, put them in the chat box, put your hand up and get you on the microphone, or we're quite happy to follow up inquiries after the session as well.
Thanks very much, Neil. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, thanks very much, Neil. Yes, we do still have, we've got 3 minutes, I think, before we have to put the next speaker on and you have to run to your meeting. So if anyone does have a question, we have got time to take something now. Neil, have you seen the questions in the chat box there? More about how you've changed the PDR process to include digital literacies, and a question about how you've managed to achieve such a major restructuring around that digital literacy agenda.
Okay, the PDR, so I'll just make sure that I'm working. Yeah, the PDR process. This has been floating around the university for a while, and obviously we came across it because we have to engage with it as members of the university, and it was just a question of talking to the HR department and talking to our heads of school, and really it's the thing about digital literacies is, I mean, one of the things we never really call them digital literacy in the university. It's about digital skills and development, but having a number of strategies that all have digital in them meant that there is a staff development requirement, and working with HR department to actually unpick how we would implement that was quite really a straightforward process. Just explaining again that we're from, it's part of a program of work and we have local evidence. I think the most important thing is actually having the evidence from the institutional reviews, going through the existing strategies and processes to find out what the institution is actually thinking about, and going to HR, in our case, with a plan saying we're rolling out a PDR process. What we really want to do is make sure that we can meet the institutional strategic ambitions. What we need to do is to be able to collate those needs and put a commitment to say that we can actually address those needs. And again, working with our Associate Deans Teaching and Learning, our heads of school, our Pro-Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, we can create quite a good community of interest around the need to embed digital skills and digital literacies. And we're now at the point where we've got heads of school coming to us saying that we're making digital literacy part of our own strategic plans and our business plans, and they want to work with us to make sure that we've got the support in place for staff. So it's really a matter of communication, lots of conversations. For us it was about opportunity, and in some places it was actually luck as well. We had a Deputy Vice Chancellor who's now moved on to the University of Bedfordshire that was very supportive. So we had a sort of top-down approach and a bottom-up approach as well, because we've got a lot of staff that are coming to us saying they want to improve their skills and they want to be able to support their students in developing the skills, because the students are saying to our academic staff that actually you as the academic should be supporting us, as well as the guys in the library and the guys in learning technology and so on. So yeah, opportunity, luck, and talking to lots of people is the answer, really.
Thanks very much, Neil, and thank you for, like I said, thank you for swapping your diary around today to be able to be with us now. And I know you've got to shoot off now, and indeed we have to move on to the Digitally Ready project from Reading. So I'll just ask, I think Enna, you're going to do it, aren't you, to take the mic.
Yes, hello there everyone. Hello from Reading. I'm Natia Gucci, also known as Enna, and I'm the Project Officer for Digitally Ready. You can see my presentation title is Readiness Across the Board, and I've been quite jealous in the past of some of the other projects in this program who have a much more focused scope. Our scope here, I think, is very broad because Digitally Ready is here to support all staff and all students, although we do have a particular focus on student employability. And I have to say that now that we are well into the project, we can really see it all coming together and just how much can be achieved if you tackle an issue from all these different angles, both in terms of sort of individual development and at institutional level as well. So in terms of the challenges particular to Reading, organisational challenges particular to Reading, we have never had a sort of formal digital university strategy, policy, or any sort of implementation plans. And as an institution, I think it's fair to say that we're quite tentative, quite risk-averse. We're very sort of collegiate in structure and in culture as well, so the real power lies at the school or departmental level. And there can be quite significant differences in practice across the different schools and departments. What we found during the baseline exercise is that many of the digital things happening at Reading were in silos. So there were many pockets of good practice, and that goes for both staff and students, but much of it was actually driven by individual initiative. And there was often a lack of coordination between kind of key professional services with a stake in digital literacies. There were often overlapping areas of activity, but actually very little joined up thinking. We also found that there were hugely varying levels of digital literacies. You know, obviously we have some genuine early adopters and forward thinkers amongst our colleagues, but we also have some very tentative users of digital technologies. And we felt that we didn't really know enough about our students' expectations, their attitudes, and the use of technology. And we didn't really know enough about the sort of digital expectations of employers either. So the challenge for us was really to pull together all these activities to create a digital community and to upskill all our staff and all our students to make sure that we had all the information in order to support them in the most effective way. And all of this against the backdrop of really major organizational change, which we've seen in the last sort of year and a half. Lots of restructuring, both on the academic side and on the service support side. Lots of changes in senior university management, not least of all the arrival of a new Vice-Chancellor, and also in terms of management of some of the key services, you know, head of careers, director of IT services, people like that. So what did we actually do? There are two strands to this. There's a sort of the local level, and I talked about the sort of power lying at that sort of level, and then there's a strategic level which overlays all of this. So I've divided this up into a slide on bottom-up and top-down approaches. So in terms of bottom-up, we focused on digital community building and upskilling. And I mentioned earlier our early adopters and forward thinkers. We made sure that we linked up with those people and made them into champions for digital development at Reading, sort of as community stewards, if you will, of our digital community. And we showcased them and we call them our digital heroes. We also provided microfunding to support local initiatives, mini projects, just to give people a bit more tentative a chance to explore technologies in a sort of safe environment, almost, very small self-contained projects. And we always try to make sure that we work with existing structures as much as possible. A, it makes sense to bring in all the stakeholders, and B, it's important in terms of sustaining the outcomes of the project. So we're working with all the relevant professional services, all the existing communities of practice, any sort of relevant projects and so on. And we're trying to give people as many formal and informal events and training opportunities to network, discuss ideas, ask questions as possible. And I just want to mention that we're obviously using digital technologies ourselves to help build that digital community. So the Digitally Ready blog has been very successful. It's become, I think, a real forum to discuss digital stuff happening. We have also got a new collaborative newsletter of digital news, and Reading is now experimenting with enterprise social networking. So we're sort of using Yammer to build our digital community as well. And we've carried out research to help us make more informed decisions and to be able to better support staff and students. So we've looked specifically at digital literacy for student employability, so looking at staff supporting students, student skills and needs, and also employer expectations. And we're also carrying out research into student technology attitudes and use as well as part of the project. And there are also things happening at strategic level. So this is the top-down part of the presentation. We've been very successful at engaging senior managers with the digital literacies agenda, and I think that's really key to the success of the project, actually. Our steering group is made up of the heads of all the key professional services. It's chaired by a senior manager who's one of the associate deans for teaching and learning, and this really helps us engage with the university committee structure. So it's the only way to get things done, to move things at a strategic level. And we also approached the new Vice Chancellor when he came in, and also the Pro Vice Chancellor for teaching and learning, and made sure that we involved them in our work from the beginning. And they have now become, genuine champions for change. The VC actually appeared in one of our videos, and he's sort of been involved at some of our events where we've sort of celebrated digital stuff happening at Reading. And when people like that show an interest, everyone else starts paying attention as well. So it's been really instrumental. Now, as a result of all of this, we now actually have genuine commitment from senior managers to developing digital literacies at an institutional level. Our new learning and teaching strategy for 2013 to 2018, I think it is, makes explicit use of TEL for the first time ever. We also have a brand new TEL strategy group, which is actually chaired by the Pro Vice Chancellor for teaching and learning, and this encompasses digital literacies and TEL, but also accompanying infrastructure, provision and development, digital communication and marketing, digital governance, and any sort of staff and student development needs kind of arising from that. Universities also signed a memorandum of understanding with FutureLearn. That's the company that will bring together UK higher education institutions to deliver MOOCs. There's a real mark of commitment. And through the project, we've collected together a body of evidence to inform some of these strategic decisions, because obviously institutional development and kind of individual development go hand in hand. And we've been sort of collecting the messages from the ground, as it were. And as a result, we're now in a much better position to anticipate and meet the needs of our staff and students and employers as well, and to support our new emerging digital community.
Thank you very much, Anna. We're just running a bit short on time now, so can I suggest that if anyone's got any questions about the work at Reading, they can maybe either contact the project afterwards or use the chat box to ask something, and then maybe Anna could pick that up in chat later, because I think you need to move on to the DIAL project at the University of the Arts London. Thanks very much, Anna.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, I think I'll skip through quite a lot of what I've got on my notes. So to introduce the project, this is the DIAL project. We're the University of the Arts London. We're made up of 6 colleges across London. The original bid aims, and we also had quite a broad scope. We basically, cultural change and improved graduate employability were our aims and the way we framed the DIAL project. The approach was to support a number of self-identifying, mutual, supportive communities of staff and students within the university based on courses, disciplines, or other naturally occurring communities who identify goals for improving their collective digital literacies. I've included some links down there at the bottom. I'll just post a link in the field there to the project resources. Now this is where we're starting to compile some of the activities, the projects and activities that are going on. Next slide, sorry. Okay, so I'll probably skip through a lot of this as well. So how are DIAL embedding digital literacies at UAL? From the very beginning, we sort of looked at the project more as a program, because what we were actually doing was delivering lots of small little mini projects, and really to look at how DIAL fits into the big picture of the university and really how this is going to happen. So early on in the project we found it was basically we wanted to try and promote the digital literacies at UAL, and also from the very start looking at a sort of long-term objective if possible. So we met with lots of senior management and obviously tried to promote the digital literacies and the project and what we were doing. And I think one of the early things there that senior management could grasp was the baselining process, and that was fantastic. So getting the senior management to support the sort of early baselining process was great. I'll skip straight on to managing expectations, demand and scope and capacity. Okay, so there are basically great expectations for DIAL at the very beginning, and I think that was one of our main objectives, was trying to manage those. So how do we acknowledge and act on all these different perspectives on what digital literacies are and which ones we were going to support, because we can't do everything. So it can be difficult to also demonstrate the benefits of what we are doing. So the projects need, what we found is all these projects that we were involved in actually needed a lot of time as well in order to experiment, and also time to work out ways of communicating what they're doing. And we've been doing that via online platforms and word of mouth. Staff also needed time and encouragement to come forward to take on projects as well. So it might be a case that they're watching us in order to propose a project. So that's kind of the idea, is that staff come forward rather than us saying staff need to do this or students need to do this. It's very much about staff coming forward saying, I want to do this. We found it difficult to deliver measurable outputs as well, against the sort of preconceived ideas of what outputs are. And our year 1 evaluation actually came up with the idea that as well as delivering resources, handbooks and handouts and things like that, but actually what we found is the communities we were developing, the sort of networks of people online but also face-to-face were our resource. We were developing this sort of different kind of resource. DIAL set up a new UAL interest group, understanding digital literacies and definitions and competencies. And we supported this really to try and map the landscape and to get a debate across the university and get different perspectives in on that, because we wanted to communicate that DIAL has its own method of exploring digital literacies at UAL, and that we also acknowledge that it's not the only method of addressing digital literacies. And understanding these needs from the various perspectives is important. Digital literacies can be individual, from many perspectives, individual, course, subject, or interest specific. For example, we've got 6 colleges and a number of central services departments, which all have their own processes and approaches. In terms of digital literacy support, there is a noticeable and growing divide where some have digital support and staff and drivers and champions embedded and some don't. DIAL is also not just focusing on learning and teaching, it's focusing on central services, and we've got library involvement and technical involvement. I'll just skip down to how DIAL are meeting these expectations and demand and scope. So what we put in place was an expressions of interest form, basically, for people to submit what they would like to do, and from that point we evaluate whether this is something we can take on, and then we do support from that. And there's a built-in evaluation process in that as well. So what do we actually offer on? We offer sort of lots of support, basically, so meetings, also some financial support, so if they need to buy out time, they can go and maybe take a week out to explore this project that they want to start. We've also gained some extra funding to help maintain this support, because the support has its limits and it has to be sustainable. So what we can support, we have to make sure it's sustainable. We've taken on extra coordinators in order to do this, so we've got 2 DIAL coordinators. What we also need to do is try and visualize what we're doing, and when we're trying to do that better as well in presenting what we're doing online, all the activities and communication. Embed, integrate with UAL and reduce the brand of DIAL. So we had a very strong brand from the very beginning, and one of the things we wanted to do was, from now on, is trying to reduce that and become more UAL rather than DIAL, because obviously when DIAL finishes we all go away. We don't want that to happen. So we really need to improve also our web environment. So we outgrown the blog quite early, and so we're looking at places to put our resources. Luckily, UAL are now looking at bringing in a digital program, which is fantastic. We've been told that digital literacies will be at the heart of that program, so we're hoping for some long-term support there. So the DIAL project groups are basically based off interests, personal challenges, service improvements, course development, progressive practice. Most groups are autonomous, and the kind of support it includes are, they basically need lots of time, small funding, and the motivations for them are obviously CPD and improved services or working practices. There are generally much less organisational responsibilities for the DIAL project team with the small project groups, as they take on the ownership for these projects themselves, and that we find that a very sustainable model. So we're also collaborating with UAL services and departments. Now this can be a slightly more complicated process, because we're having to be a lot more involved, and we're almost finding we're managing a program within a program there. So when we're bringing departments together, like C, the enterprise and employability, and learning and development, there's a lot more management going on there. We've also found academic and curriculum integration to be quite problematic, in the sense that, again, DIAL's taken on a lot more responsibility for being involved in that process, where the projects alone are more independent, where this starts to become, again, almost a program within a program. So you're forming a program for a curriculum integration. So project groups supporting academic and curriculum integration. So this could be the best model. So we've piloted this where the small groups that are independent do actually go away and support an academic course or something like that, and we found that as quite a nice model to work. So taking it away from DIAL as being the main initiators of that. And then we've got the natural cross-sector collaboration, common interest. So we've had interest from the communications we put online, from outside UAL as well, coming in from national and international. We met with some people from from Holland recently. And we've also been involved in CC Skills, which is quite important. I'll end it there because I know I've probably way overrun the time, so I'll stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. That's great. And again, you haven't drastically overrun, but there's no time for questions now because we need to move on to Greenwich. So if anyone does have a question or comment for Chris, feel free to put it in the chat box, or maybe follow the links to the blog and take it up with Chris there. So thank you very much, and we'll move on to Greenwich and Mark.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Okay, I didn't have time to test my microphone. I'm sorry. Oh, marvelous. Hi. So I've got 5 minutes just to talk about one thing that we're doing at Greenwich, and I've been asked to talk about how we're involving staff and students. So just to give a really quick background, the project is called Graduate Attributes in Transition. And the project is really designed looking at how students move into university, how they move through university, and then how they move out of university, either into employment, self-employment, further study, whatever it may be. And the idea is, how do we manage this journey and align this journey with digital literacies? Is the digital literacy agenda important in here, which it definitely is? And then how can we bring these two things together to ensure the success of our students? So ultimately, that really is the underlying premise for the work. And so I've been asked to talk about students. So really, from a project point of view, the challenges we really are facing are understanding digital literacies, how do we embed these in the curriculum, how do we support staff with these, students with these, very similar to other places. But from a project point of view, we're faced with how do we deliver a very large-scale institutional change, how can we foster accelerated buy-in, because actually 2 years is a short period of time, so how can we really maximize what we're doing in those 2 years? How can we ensure currency of the work that we're doing to support sustainability and other schools and faculties in the university buying in? And so really the diagram in front of you is really showing you that red line is the velocity for project, going from our little wee black dot as us in the middle of the university, and how we move that from a faculty, institution, higher education, and then into the employment sector, because we're working with employers very strongly as well, and to mediate the change that we want to do. So, looking at what we're doing, we're working very strongly with students as change agents and students as change entrepreneurs, and really we're using students in this project as a vehicle. We're based within a central unit, and the best way to get that message, to get those ideas, those thoughts, that practice out, is have a very strong vehicle, and students are an excellent vehicle for this, and just the things that they can do is brilliant, to tell you the truth. The project wouldn't be where it is now without the amazing input from students. So what we've been doing, we've developed a process for a cross-university research group. This research group comprises students, smaller faculties, different academic years, postgraduates, undergraduates, all mixing together, all working together, and they're undertaking research for the project. They're then developing research for the project, they're developing resources for us, and then ultimately now they're actually beginning to engage in staff development as well, and it's brilliant, to tell you the truth. So one of the important things for us is getting this network of students there. Another way we're engaging students to deliver our message are the use of e-editors within schools. We're looking at how discovery of digital tools, digital literacies, ideas and thoughts works, and there isn't really a common way that students can do this. So we're in the process of setting up e-magazines within faculties, and these are co-owned with staff and students working together as editors, and these really are a sort of digital nexus of resources that we're producing and other things in the schools, again created by staff and students. So the ownership is there, which resource again supports sustainability, and it's a very nice way of building that message through. And then finally, as I say, these students are working as educational developers. So they're engaging in research, and they've identified something that they need to work on. And we're just about to launch effectively a student workshop series called the Greater Series. So they're producing a series of workshops aligned around graduate attributes, retention, employability, assessment, transition, attainment and recognition, which are all really key areas of DL. And the idea is students are then creating these themselves. They're very on pulse, very current, very aligned to the environment, and they're going to be delivering these workshops with staff and us, and really supporting the DL agenda and moving that forward, which is kind of exciting. Now, finally, a couple of the other interesting gains from the project. It's nice to see that students are really being recognised as valued contributions to change within Greenwich. Another project recently was launched, which was iPads in Education. The School of Science decided to give all full-time students an iPad, and one of the ways I wanted to make sure that this project was going to be successful was to adopt students as change agents delivering this. And it was a very nice thing to see that the work that we've been doing is now being mirrored into another school. It's great to see discussions that may not have taken place begin to take place. And as I say, by engaging students in this manner, it's continuously on pulse. Another thing which is really exciting is now beginning to work with other universities as well, looking at more of a national level. How do these students as change agents, change entrepreneurs, change heroes, change whatever else capacity they're working in, begin to work together? How can they support each other? And that's a piece of work that we're very excited about, and that's going to be launching quite soon. And there's going to be quite a lot of information about that to follow. And again, it's really looking at how students can be involved with staff to deliver an agenda, and in this case, a DL. So that's really my 5 minutes, really. And that was just talking about how we're using students within an institution, using students to engage with staff, and supporting the development of digital literacies within the institution. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We've got a minute or two for questions to Mark. If anyone would like to ask anything, probably easier just to type in the chat box. Right, I think maybe given the time, if we moved on to, we just had a final slide. Helen, did you want to do this one?
I can do, Sarah, if that's useful. I just wanted to thank the projects really, because although they had so little time to gallop through what is in all cases a very complicated, multifaceted project, I think it was possible to see that there are different approaches being taken, whether that's a sort of strategic restructuring approach, whether it's mini projects in departments, or working very closely with students as change agents, or indeed kind of having an influence in as many places as possible. It's great to see different approaches all kind of bearing fruit. Particularly appropriate to say that in the case of FeedPod. So we were kind of 6 months away from the end of the programme, and one of my jobs is to bring together the resources from the programme. And I just thought I'd put up a slide to show some of the things that will be coming out of the programme that you may want to look out for and pick up later. They'll certainly be emerging in the design studio, and that's the links that I've put up are a good place to keep watching for them. So there are, for example, some self-assessment, sort of self-development quizzes, which have been proving quite popular, and I think have been repurposed by a couple of institutions outside the programme already. There isn't one programme level version of any of these, but we will be collating the project versions and in some cases producing a more collaborative version. There's lots of briefings, and I saw some discussion about what staff are asking for. Well, it's interesting that some of the things that students are asking for, particularly around issues of how they use social media for study success, not how they use social media, but how they can use that for study success. And staff are very keen to have kind of boundaries made clear to them around what works and doesn't there. Digital identity is a big issue, and digital research methods as well, whether that's undergraduate or postgraduate. So those kind of key areas we've got briefings in, and many, many others. We're building various support materials for curriculum design, including various sets of cards, a bit like the viewpoints tools that some of you may have seen coming out of the curriculum design programme from Jisc. And as I have been putting in the chat box, we've got lots of examples emerging of digital literacy development that is subject specific, which I think will be particularly useful to pick up on in departments. Organisational case studies, every institution will be producing one of those with the lessons they have learned about affecting change in this area. And I think also, as came up earlier, there's a whole range of role descriptions and job descriptions associated with some of the changes to professional responsibilities that we've seen. And in some cases, those have been formalised in the case of new standards and frameworks and benchmarks. And finally, I just put in a link to the institutional audit. There will be an updated version of that, and already you can see there's quite a few tools associated with that you can pick up and repurpose if you want to do something similar at your institution. So hopefully plenty to be getting on with in the design studio. Please be patient and bear in mind that it's not a finished, polished info kit, but a place where we try and encourage projects to bring forward emerging outcomes so that they can be picked up by the sector as soon as they become useful, and you're not waiting around for the end of the project. But do have patience with the fact that that's the nature of the resource if you're visiting it. And thank you very much for coming and taking part. I'm sure that a few of us could be around a few more seconds if there's questions of the chat window. But I'll just hand back to Sarah to close otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Helen, and thanks to everybody. Thanks, as Helen said, thanks to all the participants for coming. It's lovely to see such a high level of interest in the programme. Thanks to all the moderators and all the speakers. And yes, we'll probably stop the recording very soon. But thanks to everyone, and I can certainly stay around for a few minutes.